when Carol and I started to do the sampler, we each took a woman that we wanted to do, and I wanted to do Sojourner.
I wanted to do her too, but I let you.
Sojourner Truth was honestly, the only woman I had ever heard of before we started to do Candace's music. Sojourner Truth was a great speaker of her day, and she spoke out for women's right and to abolish slavery. Let me give you a little background on her first. Sojourner Truth was born into slavery, a black woman, they're not quite sure of her birth date, sometime around the 1790s. And when she was about 6 years old, she was sold away from her family, and her name was Isabella at that time. Her first owner gave her the name of Isabella. Isabella was sold away to a Dutch family, and in this Dutch family they were very religious, and at that point while she was with them she learned a lot of Dutch prayers and she learned the Christian way of life. When she was 12 she was sold again to a tavern owner, and this was a very rough life. She was around coarse men and very rough speaking people, and she was treated cruelly. In fact, she received several beatings in the beginning because she could only speak Dutch. And during this time, she also met her husband, who was another slave, John, and in the forthcoming years, they had 5 children. And also during this time, with all this rough treatment she received, she soon forgot her Dutch prayers, and she strayed away from her faith. But when her youngest son was 5 years old, he was illegally sold away from her. Slave traders came and took him out of state, which even then was against the law. This was in New York State. And so Isabella was so distraught over all this that had happened that she escaped from her present master, and she ran to the Quakers who took her in. The Quakers were very much against slavery. They were strong components of the Underground Railroad at that time. And the Quakers used their power to get Isabella's son back. And during this time, she came back into her walk with the Lord, and she prayed so hard at that time that when she got her son back, she took that as a real sign that the Lord wanted her to do something great with her life. It was just about that time that there was an emancipation in New York of all the slaves, and she was freed. And it was at that time that she took the name Sojourner, means one who is meant to wander. And she went with this one name for quite a while and lived in the white men's world where everybody had 2 names. So she thought, well, okay, I have to have a last name, Truth. Then she took for her last name, Sojourner Truth. And she came to Michigan at that point, and she settled in a black settlement just inside Battle Creek. And that is where she sallied forth and spoke at women's rights conventions. She spoke at freedmen's camps, and these were camps of freed slaves. Once they found their freedom, they didn't know what to do with it. They didn't know how to live as free men, especially in the white man's world. And they would gather together in camps, and they weren't quite sure what to do next. And she was a big help in that area. She would come to them and speak to them on everything from finances to manners and try to get them mainstreamed into free life. And she died a very poor woman. They had to take up a collection to get her buried, and she's buried in Battle Creek in just a small grave. And in Sojourner Truth, to the day she died, she could not read or write. And an aside that somebody told me is that Sojourner Truth would often sit on her porch, and people would come by and read to her out of the Bible, which she really liked. But she was quoted as saying, I like it a lot better when kids read to me, or when children read to me, because they don't try to read their meaning into it. So this is that was Sojourner Truth, and we come to the point of this song was a women's rights convention that was organized in Michigan around 1860.
Well, there was a committee that was formed to put together this women's rights convention.
Right? We formed a committee, and we rented a hall, the biggest hall in town, with a balcony all around.
And it was my job to invite some of the noted speakers of the day. I invited a Baptist minister and a Presbyterian and a Unitarian, and a Methodist minister, and one Sojourner Truth.
Now, we were not quite sure who or what a Sojourner Truth was, but we were sure she had something important to say on this issue, and we wanted her at our convention. So, on the day of the convention, all the speakers got up and took their turn at the podium, and one by one the men gathered in their little groups, and it seemed they were of one mind on women's rights. They all seemed to firmly agree that women should have no rights. But the first one got up and said, "Women are truly the flowers of our lives. We should help them into carriages, help them across puddles, give them the kind of lives we ourselves cannot afford. After all, we are the stewards of society. It is us who need to concern ourselves with politics and the right to vote, but women are God's little children, and they should live their lives in such a manner."
And it was the Baptist minister that got up and said, "If God had wanted women to have the same rights as men, then surely he would have sent a sign through the life and the death of his Son, Jesus Christ. Well, if God had wanted women to have the same rights as men, then wouldn't he have made Christ a woman?"
And still another one of the speakers got up and said, "Well, why shouldn't men have superior rights and privileges? After all, look at our superior intellect." And through this came Sojourner Truth. Sojourner Truth was a very large woman, over 6 feet tall, and just her very regal demeanor commanded attention. Sojourner Truth came up to the podium, and this is what she said. "Now listen here, children. What's all this talking here about? I see that man over there. He says that women needs to be helped into carriages. They needs to be helped over the mud puddles. They needs to be helped over the ditches and given the best in the world. Well, I say nobody has ever helped me into no carriages, or ever helped me over no mud puddles, or ever helped me over no ditches, or given me the best in the world. And ain't I a woman? Ain't I a woman? Look at me and look at my arms. Well, I have plowed, and I have planted, and I have gathered into barns when there ain't no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? Well, I can work as hard as any man, and I could eat as much when I could get it, and I could bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 5 children into slavery, and I have seen them sold away from me. And I have cried out with a mother's grief in the night, and there ain't no one that heard me. 'Ceptin' Jesus, sweet Jesus, and ain't I a woman? Now listen here, children. I see that man over there, the one in the little black suit. He says that women can't have the same rights as man, 'cause you know Christ, he weren't a woman. Well, now I'm asking you, children, where did your Christ come from? Where did your Christ come from? Well, I will tell you, children. He came from God, and from a woman, and you know man had nothing to do with it. And I said, peace almighty, is it coming to my people? Peace almighty, is it coming to my people? Michael, row your boat ashore. I ain't gonna study war no more, oh no, no. I want some peace all over, want some love all over. I want some understanding all over this world. I want some freedom, sweet freedom. I want some peace all over this world. Yeah.